Welcome. This is Brass Check, and it is October 8th, 2020. I like to put timestamps on these things so that in the future people have some sense of what was happening when. We have a great guest. We've done an interview with her before, which was a lot of fun. I'm going to put the link below. That interview was also an inspiration for our video, Pay No Attention to the Man Behind the Curtain, Helen Beniski. Hey, Helen, how are you doing?
Pretty good. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Helen captured some, among many other things, Helen captured some screenshots off of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation website that showed the millions and millions of dollars they have shoveled to an almost countless number of so-called news outlets. And of course, those listings are no longer available online, but Helen has the screenshots, and so we included some of that data in our film, Pay No Attention to the Man Behind the Curtain. So today we're going to get into the manufacture of this whole fraud, and everybody's probably heard the phrase the manufacture of consent, and hopefully people have heard of Edward Bernays, and if not, he's really worth a quick look at, studying his material briefly. He was a guy who was publishing in the 20s. Goebbels of Germany was a huge fan, actually had stacks of his book called The Crystallization of Public Opinion in his office, which he gave to his friends and colleagues. I believe Kristallnacht was actually named after that book, and because people say that crystal means mirror and window in German, it doesn't. Crystal is crystal. So I don't know where the term Kristallnacht came from, unless it was the crystallizing event, which was that night when they went out and broke Jewish people's store windows. So I have a feeling Kristallnacht is actually inspired by Edward Bernays, but that's another topic for another day. But let's start with the premise, and we're just going to ask you to take this on faith, and then we'll try to establish this during this call, but also in future study, that the flow of news is not this spontaneous emission of random naturalness, that people actually sit down with a calendar and plan out. It's not strictly. It's like war plans. You kind of go, we're going to hit the beach on this day, and then we're going to keep moving east. And stuff happens, and they have to adapt. It never is a perfect plan, but they have a plan, and they have a calendar, and they have like a point A and a point B and a point C and a point D, and they're It's like a story. It's like a pageant, as they said in the great movie Wag the Dog. It's a pageant. And so Helen has been studying this better than just about anybody, as good as anybody, let's put it that way. And she's going to talk with us about the unfolding of the pageant of COVID, the COVID cornucopia of bullshit. So, it's hard to know where to start, because every time somebody says the flu of 1918 and it could come back, and they've been saying that since 1919. So in a sense, that pageant started back then. But I guess we could say the pageant started with the China stories.
Yeah, definitely. There was all these videos going around of people falling down in the streets and convulsing on their hospital beds, and we were hearing of all of these terrible things that both were happening to people in Wuhan and that they were doing to try to contain this sudden, unexpected, really terrifying plague in Wuhan. So it was basically one on top of the other. But originally there wasn't so much filtering over here, except for videos spreading on social media. So you really didn't get much of anything. And as soon as it started spreading outside China, the coverage did not match what the events supposedly were. So the World Health Organization immediately starts warning about an infodemic. Oh, this is the scary part, an infodemic. There's untruth going around. We need a vaccine against misinformation, which completely doesn't go with the whole, there's a deadly disease going around. We need to stop it. So that was the first major indication for me that it was completely bullshit. But in retrospect, seeing people convulsing on their hospital beds for a supposed respiratory illness, that should have been a dead giveaway. But you never know. People are cooking up all kinds of diseases in their biological research labs. But
actually, let's look at that Chinese stuff. I think that the social media, the fragmentary social media stuff that we saw, could have been a fabrication If it happened in a natural way, there was news footage and then some Chinese guy uploaded it to Twitter and next thing you know, it's on our Twitter feeds but it also could have been that there were people deliberately taking vignettes and inject them into American social media in a fragmentary way. And it's kind of like you hear a rumbling in the distance, like, what is it? That's how I experienced the whole China thing. It's like, what's this crazy thing? It was out of focus. And if you're making a movie, sometimes the scariest monster is the one that you don't show.
Yeah, that's exactly what they were doing. This just kind of like having a shadowy outline and, oh, here's a totally out of context video. We don't know what it means, but here's a person just falling down and convulsing on the sidewalk and everybody avoiding them because they're scared. And then here is, cops dragging a woman out of her apartment and everybody's screaming and freaking out and no context. Again, that's the most important part is no context because that makes it much scarier if you don't know why is this happening? Could this happen to me someday? What is this? Where is it? Where did it come from? And then, of course, they came out with the bat thing, and it was all about the bats.
Yeah.
Bat soup. The Chinese are eating bats.
And there was some other weird animal that we don't even have over here in North America.
The pangolin. Because it came out that the wet market that they blamed it on, because they always blame this thing on wet markets. If you look back in like news coverage of illnesses that happen to Chinese people, they always blame the wet markets because it stops them from getting more GMO food into Chinese people's stomachs. But the bat thing, they found out that the wet market didn't actually sell bats.
Right.
So, whoops, that's a problem. Okay. Well, we should have planned that one better. Oh, well, how about pangolin? What's a pangolin? Oh, it's one of these weird scaly things with a big nose. Oh, yeah, that's great. Nobody knows what pangolin is. They're not going to look into that. And, I mean, they never even managed to really prove that. But people, once they saw a pangolin, they were just so confused, they let it slide.
It's funny. My brother, who is the ideal propaganda consumer, he's a corporate attorney. He used to specialize in bond offerings for casinos. I mean, he's just on the dark side of things. But he's just consumes it all. He believes it all. His biggest aggravation was those damn wet markets. So somehow the message made it through to that level of society that the wet. Now the thing about wet markets are, you go somewhere and there's a live animal, and they slaughter it right there. And that way the animal's fresh, and you may go, oh my God, that's barbaric. Where do you think your hamburger comes from, folks?
And the other thing is that a lot of places where they have these things, refrigeration is only a recent development.
Yeah.
Like if you go to Nepal still, you see them selling meat by the slab, like on a table with flies buzzing all over it. And it's just like, when you order meat at a restaurant, you're getting that, and so no, you don't want to do that. But like, you know what you're getting. They can't slip in some mystery meat. They can't pump it full of hormones and chemicals. If you see the animal there and it looks sickly, you know not to buy it.
Exactly.
I mean, it's weird for Western sensibilities because we have supermarkets and we've had refrigeration for decades and everything. But like, it actually makes sense if you think about it and you think about the conditions under which a lot of these people live. Now, China has modernized very rapidly, so a lot of these people. Wuhan is a huge city, so maybe not so much there. But outside of Wuhan, this is a thing that not everybody has. And if they do have it, they've only gotten it relatively recently. So, but they hate the wet markets because you can't give them mystery meat in the wet markets.
Yeah. But we get these nice plastic wrapped cut things that have been injected with chemicals to keep the color looking healthy. It's just and it's like, folks, do you think there are not ghastly live where you kill animals, slaughterhouses? Do you think we don't have those in America? Do you think the meat somehow jumps into a package and no death is involved? I mean, it's just madness. So the other thing about the China thing we're focusing a lot on China because I think that was a really important part of this pageant. As far as I know, COVID doesn't cause convulsions. Okay.
Like the long list of side effects that they've come up with, convulsions has never appeared on there. And I agree, China is definitely very much an important part of this whole like soap opera because that goes back all the way to 2010 with the Rockefeller Plan and scenarios for the future of technology and international development, which we discussed in the last interview.
Yeah.
But like that, it's very important that China is the first place that. If not the first place that this strikes, at least the place that sets the model of control for everybody else, because China, as everybody knows, has a much more strict system of control, top-down control Although at least they know they live in that system. U.S., which is getting very much like that, we don't know that. We think we live in a democracy, which is delusional. But yeah, China's response is heralded in the Rockefeller Plan as being the model for the rest of the world, and they saved their people, and gosh, didn't they do a great job? We should be just like them. So that's why China is so central in this.
And then they're always they always hang these diseases on China, or I think there was a swine flu thing that they hung on Mexico. Never happens yeah, believe it or not. Yeah, there was yeah. Check it out. One of the swine flu epidemics originated in Mexico, supposedly. Can't happen in one of our overstuffed corporate industrial pig farms in North Carolina, where they have 20 million pigs in one room. That could never happen there.
Well, yeah, not the giant oceans of pig shit that are that overflow with every hurricane. I mean, yeah, that doesn't spread disease at all. That's totally sterile and fun to play around in.
See, once you're within the borders of the United States, everything becomes sterile. There's no pathogens. There's no parasites. Everything's groovy. But once you leave the U.S., boy, it's just a shit show. So we know that. There was a movie. Did you see the fictionalized movie called Pandemic?
I was looking for that, but I don't think was that the one where they're like all in the suits, and when they go out into the place where there's like the zombie people, or is that something else?
There's something else, and I think we pulled it off of Netflix. I think we had to pay up for $2 for it or something. But in that movie, people were convulsing.
Okay, no, I think
pigs were, and usually what happens is they'll have some ghastly food, animal raising corporate thing in Asia. We haven't had a bad outbreak here as far as I know, but they have them in Asia. And, an entire farm all the animals will die. They never attribute it to, well, gee, maybe, we raised them really badly and really poorly and we killed them. It's always got to be some wild new virus. And of course, the scientists can, drop down there and find a virus because there's basically, as far as I understand, an infinite number of viruses to find.
Yeah.
So anyway, so that's the China story. We have the mix of crazed, fragmentary, irrelevant hysteria with fantastic porno of authoritarian abuses of civilian population. So that's how the show got started.
Wet market squee, ew, gross fluids thing, that. Right. That's definitely a big part of it. Get the revulsion going, and look at that. Of course they got sick. Well, duh.
It's the Wuhan flu. They ruined it for everybody. So then it looks like the scene changes, and now we're in northern Italy. So what have you seen in your analysis of the northern Italy story?
Well, that was where there was all the footage of the hospitals are overflowing, and was that where the clapping started? I think that was
yeah. Oh yeah. Well, you applaud
that was the big meme that I got from Italy, just this idea of, they call it clap for your carers in the UK, but clap for your captors is more accurate. This idea of leaning out your window and applauding on your balcony for these people who are supposedly taking care of all of these dying people, which it turned out, of course, at least in the case of the elderly, they were taking care of them in a different sense, as in taking care of them as in hastening the end of their lives because they're useless eaters, in the words of Henry Kissinger, and don't need them around anymore. We need to clear out more space, as Soylent Green's original title, Make Room, Make Room.
Oh, I didn't know that. So the
original book, Harry Harrison, Make Room, is what Soylent Green is based on.
Oh, wow.
And of course, they culled the elderly there, too. So I don't know if Italians ended up with any strange new food varieties, but
oh, God.
I don't know.
So they took care of them by taking them out.
Yeah, basically.
It's interesting, the public clapping. The CIA was really big. I think the first time that I was aware they used it, though they might have used it elsewhere, but in Chile, they would organize housewives to march with pots and pans and bang the pots and pans. That was literally a CIA staging. I'm not saying the CIA is involved in staging this particular thing. They don't need to, because the cross-pollination between CIA employees and people advising the CDC and the pharmaceutical industries. I mean, it's all just one big happy family, and I'm sure they're sharing notes, and I'm sure they all go to the same trainings. And I'd love to know where these guys get trained and where they have their strategy meetings. And I'm surprised nobody's come out with a tape or a document.
They have come out with documents, actually. I mean, there's the WHO document about requiring every member of whatever group it was to run at least 2 simulations of a worldwide pandemic before September 2020. So that's something, like I said, I figured you would have seen that by now.
Oh, no.
But, no, that's a real document, and it's actually still on the WHO website. You can read it there. It's not one of these weird things that, like, oh, well, it looks like a smoking gun, but looks like Photoshop. No, this is real, and it's requiring at least one of which had to, of course, I'm not going to remember what the important part was, but it was like something that was really a dead giveaway that it was referring to this particular pandemic. And like, which is when you put it together with all the other little clues, like Pompeo saying, "Well, we're in an exercise," or however he said it, and then Trump saying, "I wish you had told me." That there are so many eyebrow-raising little bits and pieces, and Trump even saying back in April, "Well, I didn't want to shut down, but they made me do it." And, okay, who's they?
Yeah.
But,
that's maybe we can get to that. Who is
but also
that?
as far as Italy goes, in terms of like the CIA, like they have these stay behind networks. Operation Gladio is actually Italy, so it's very possible that some of the same people who are in these stay behind networks, at least, because didn't the military get ruled out in Italy as well? They were involved at least in enforcing quarantine. I seem to recall that.
It's very possible. It's very possible. I know in China they were. They had
in Spain they were.
It made military police in China that ran the quarantines, and they really they were hardcore. I mean, roadblocks, curfews, paper, searching people's papers, locking people in their houses. The other thing too is I have video of this. Maybe I'll make a note of that. I found some video of Fauci recorded pre-pandemic talking about the fact that a lot of Italians come to the NIH to study in the Fauci laboratory and spend 4, 5, and 6 years. And then he listed all the cities that have Fauci graduates: Rome, Bari, Milan, all the places that had problems.
Well, that's a dead giveaway right there, because he's definitely near the center of this whole thing, if not at the center, at least the public-facing personality for the whole operation.
And I think Brass Check subscribers know this, but it's worth repeating. 2 things about three things about Northern Italy. 2 are objective, 1 is subjective. The first one is it is the oldest demographic in all of Europe. These are the oldest people in all of Europe, the Northern Italians, because they're prosperous. They live longer. The other thing is they always have...
Polluted as hell.
What's that?
It's polluted as hell.
And oh yeah, that's the other thing. It is the most polluted part of Europe, believe it or not. It's extremely, and people don't think of Italy as industrialized, but once you get into that valley where Milan is, that's why Italy's really 2 countries. It's a pretty rich north and a pretty poor south. And the north is rich because it's industrialized. So they had a very severe air pollution event in February, interestingly enough. Now those are the objective facts. Oh, they also always have I think a 3.2 emergency beds per. I don't know, whatever it is. It's low. They're really low. Like Germany has 8. I think it's per 100,000 or per 10,000. I can't remember but it's like Germany has 8, Finland has 12, Korea has 13, Italy total has 3.2, and we're talking about the rich part of Italy. So if you dilute all of Italy, because parts of Italy are poor as dirt. Once you get down to the south, it's poor. So when you look at an all-nation average, it's probably maybe a little better in the north, but so they have a shortage of emergency beds. They have a bad flu season every year. The hospitals get slammed every year. They have an old demographic, and they have a horrible air quality system. The other thing, and this is subjective, and I can say this because I'm half Italian and I'm Northern Italian, it is a very neurotic, hypochondriacal population, and the only other population I can think of that's similar is New York City. Having, and it's, I'm not really joking. I think if I lived in New York City for a long time. I'm four generations of New York, so I really kind of like, I know New York, and I love New York, and I love the people of New York. But we're hypochondriacs.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
It's the most neurotic place. I mean, everybody is like very fast paced, but they're also very like on edge and really neurotic. I mean, that if there's a pandemic going around, they're going to be convinced they're going to get it. I mean, there was so much, even when there was all the big Ebola scare, when there wasn't actually any Ebola, there was like one person who had just come back from West Africa who had it. Everyone in New York was talking about Ebola. And it's like, dudes, you're not going to get it. There's no Ebola here, man. But yeah, if there's a pandemic, we want it secretly. We want it.
Yeah. I mean, have friends, colleagues who I thought were a little bit more mentally stable than I realized they actually are. They've absolutely lost their shit over this. They still have. They're still in COVID land.
It's given people a meaning when they didn't previously have one in their lives. It's like a lot of people who were put off whatever track they were on by the shutdowns, and who maybe they lost their job, or maybe they lost some relationship or something. Like now they have nothing, and they can be a rule follower and be really, really good at rule following. Like, which brings us actually to the next thing that I was going to suggest we talk about as far as like these themes that coverage the shaming from afar, like the people standing on their balconies, not only clapping but yelling at the guy in the street who's not social distancing. This, I don't know if we saw it in Europe too, but I recall seeing, I think it was like in Spain, but I remember mostly seeing it in New York. There was like a story, and for some reason every single outlet covered this. Reuters, NBC, some other ones. There was like a video of a dude on a balcony, and there was like people walking on the sidewalk, and he was yelling at them and shaming them for not social distancing. And that was like hailed as like the best thing ever. Like, isn't it great that people are enforcing the rules? We care about our health. Isn't this great? And it's like some random guy in New York City. Why is this newsworthy? Obviously, we know why.
Okay, so there's for people that this idea may be new to, manufactured. I mean, maybe it happened, but they took the clip and decided to make it national. Somebody had to decide, let's make this clip national. Let's put it on ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox, NPR, PBS, WOR. I mean, someone's deciding that. It's not happening. It's not happening by itself. Hey, before we leave Italy, just one thing I want to say because it's important. The suits they were wearing in Italy were recycled Ebola suits. And I do have a photo. I wish I had an archivist, but I have a photo of two guys in the Ebola suit, and it looks really scary. And standing right behind him are two PR guys in business suits. They don't even have a face mask on. It was a photo shoot, and didn't you say they were reusing footage from Italy in New York?
Yes. So like there was a footage of an Italian hospital. I don't remember exactly where, but somewhere in Lombardy region, and it popped up. CBS supposedly made a mistake, oopsie, and used it to represent New York. And people called them out because, like, it's kind of, some people actually pay attention when they're watching television. And then they did it again, like a few weeks later. And,
wow.
Oopsie. Okay, how do you do that twice? Like, you would think, but it's not like we haven't caught them in this before. I remember they were showing what was supposed to be an attack in Syria, except it was actually a gun show, a demonstration in, like, Kentucky, and it was just really, really obvious.
Well, then, and of course, the notorious 9/11 Palestinian celebration, when it would have been nighttime in Palestine, and here it is like broad, like noon, and they're cheering 9/11.
The real thing, which was the dancing Israelis.
Oh yeah, and then well, that's a whole nother thing. So we're segueing into New York, the recycling of Italian footage into New York City. And of course, some Italian doctors had to say, sure, bring your cameras in. We're not worried that this is a highly contagious death zone. Come on in with your TV cameras and film us running around, doing the crazy operations. You see, it's a little good mental exercise for everybody. It's a simple thing, but it's easy to forget. If you're seeing something, that means there's somebody behind that camera. And if there's a camera man or woman, there's somebody behind the camera people. who sent them there. And then there's somebody who decided to put that footage on TV. It's not like it's like an illusion that I'm seeing reality. I mean, yeah, sort of. But it's kind of like going to the movies and saying, "Oh, I'm seeing reality." Yeah, it really did happen that Spider-Man jumped from one building to another. That kind of did happen in a sense. But 20,000 people staged it and put it on, into the theater and then ran ads so that you went to watch it. And we really need to watch, I think we really need to watch TV news as if it were a Hollywood movie, because it's pretty darn close to that in reality, I think.
Yeah, I mean, just the sheer amount of, like, well, for one thing, the people who are involved, as you said, not only is there a cameraman there, but there's probably a sound guy and generally a couple of other people. And I mean, we see this all the time. We see Anderson Cooper standing there in like all this rain gear and up to his knees in water. And then there's like guys walking around on dry land around him, and it's like he's standing in a puddle, and like, ooh, hurricane, scary. And it's basically the equivalent of that. I mean, some guy actually got caught the other day, like he was actually harassed. It was a photographer for some news organization, and he was in one of the Hasidic Jewish neighborhoods of South Brooklyn, which are now under attack by Andrew Cuomo, our lovely gorilla-shaped governor. And it was the guy was trying to find somebody who wasn't wearing a mask, and so somebody came up to him and just starts like basically pointing out what he's actually doing, and he was like freaking out and like and he didn't want to stop doing it because he really wanted to get that no mask footage, but this guy was ruining his shot. So it was an interesting encounter. But it's like there are a lot of these sort of filming something that is clearly not happening. There were a lot of these actually with the corona test, the lines
oh yeah, right,
Elmhurst Hospital and a couple of these other ones. And actually out here in Coney Island, there was a COVID tent. And they had the cameras in there to just film the people going about their business. I came down here from where I lived during when this was happening, which is 10 miles away, rode my bike all the way out here just to make sure the ocean was still there. You know, after 2 months on lockdown, you don't know. But I figured I would stop into the hospital and see what was going on. The COVID tent was empty. There was nobody there. There was like people, a few, like maybe 3 or 4 people, hospital staff, but there was nobody in the beds. So, I mean...
And that was going on, from my understanding, all over the country. People were going in with their iPhones and photographing empty tents. And people were also going to emergency rooms around the country and saying, there's nobody here.
Yeah, I watched the emergency room for a while, too, at both the hospital out here and the one in my old neighborhood. And there was nobody coming in or out. I mean, the parking lots were empty. Some people will say, oh, that's because they were all really busy and they weren't coming in. No, there was nobody there, literally nobody there. That parking lot is usually like at least half full. And this is what all these nurse whistleblowers were saying, a lot of them at least, saying, okay, we've been furloughed or we've been told to just stay home.
And the Navy ship that they brought in, I think, had 2 patients on it total.
And all the fake, these like QAnon idiots who were like, oh, that's to rescue the slave children or something. And it's like,
oh my God,
not helping.
Yeah, that's a whole nother. Maybe we'll do a whole show on the vast delusional population that thinks Donald Trump is secretly helping us. You guys. Please.
Yeah, I mean, how much more, like, you're gonna wait till you're being personally held down with somebody with a needle in your arm and then maybe you'll get it, but no, you'll still think that this needle is somehow 5D chess and it's gonna make you Superman or something. I don't have much faith for these people, honestly.
They also built a field hospital at the Javits Center. I think they had 2,500 beds. I think they had 100 patients total. And patients, just people that walked in. I mean, who knows what they had or didn't have. Let's talk about the other thing about New York that we talked about this offline a couple of weeks ago. People were like, the sirens, the wail. Tell them about New York and sirens since you're currently living there.
Yeah, this Molly, what's her name? Molly Jongfest, this reporter for some idiotic media establishment organization, was in a video and being all solemn, talking about the vaccine and how she was being in a vaccine trial and how this was really a great thing to do and stuff. And she was talking about how horrible it was in the early days of the pandemic when all you could hear in New York were sirens going back and forth and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, which New York do you live in?
Right.
Because for one thing, hearing sirens on the street in New York is pretty common. I mean, there's police sirens, fire sirens, ambulance sirens, but like the two other kinds are usually the more common ones. So unless she's at the window looking out at the street, and even then she's not going to see what all of them are, but it's like, this is not abnormal. This is like a normal day in New York City. And I mean, I certainly didn't hear any more sirens than usual. And the idea that there were no other noises, I mean, like I said, I don't know what part of New York she lives in, and things certainly were a little more quiet because they shut down the bars and the restaurants and stuff. But like, you still hear cars going by, people walking around, people shouting, people. I mean, if anything, you heard more people shouting as everybody's losing their mind because they're locked down. But it's this revisionism is really a very dangerous thing because it's only going to get worse. They're going to talk about, well, never mind, they already did talk about, oh, these bodies, these refrigerated trucks full of bodies, and this was everywhere, and oh my God, this is so serious, and people are dying left and right. And okay, so that's why you had to reclassify all respiratory deaths as COVID in order to get your numbers. Sure, that doesn't speak to me of a world-ending pandemic, but, you know, what do I know?
Yeah, there's another sort of logistical thing, which is when somebody dies in a hospital, unless somebody comes and gets the body, that body stays at the hospital. Like a body just doesn't just miraculously go somewhere. It's like either got to be picked up or it stays. And when you think of the number of families that were financially destroyed, because funeral homes don't work for free. Not only that, I mean, they want their money up front. Not only that, somehow you have to meet with them and make the deal. So if all the funeral homes were closed and you couldn't get to make a deal with a funeral home, either because you didn't have the money or you didn't have the logistics or both, that body was going to sit in the hospital. So if you stopped the natural flow, I mean, this is kind of a macabre vision, but if you stop the natural flow of dead bodies from the New York City hospitals on a normal month, they're going to back up.
No, that's a very good point, because then they tried to make a big fuss out of, oh, look, they're digging these mass graves on Hart Island, which is typically where they bury the bodies of unclaimed dead people. So that's a logical continuity, because that's a very good point, which I have not heard anybody else mention, which is seems to me a major oversight, because that would be a good answer to, oh, look, these bodies, oh, we're all dying, this is a horrifying thing, we must stop all of our lives because people are dying. Well, this is a normal day in reality, and that's, I mean, this is probably beyond the scope of this talk at least, but this idea that we can conquer death.
Right.
No, sorry, that's not happening. We don't want it to happen either. But the mass graves was a thing for at least a whole weekend, and in Twitter time, that's an eternity. So that they really made a big deal about that, and they even admitted in the fine print that these were not necessarily COVID deaths at all. This is backed up bodies from like March, February, because nobody's got the money to bury their loved ones, and a lot of people don't have loved ones around to bury them because they're either stuck at home in wherever they are, or they just don't have the money to do it.
My favorite was, they had the drone, go over Hart Island, and then there was one news show where they're going dozens and dozens of unmarked graves, but the picture showed, I counted 8 coffins. That's not dozens and dozens, it's 8. It's like, if you've got a picture of dozens, show us, but they couldn't even do that. So the pageant just goes on. So then we started to kind of backtrack. We started in China with this sort of hazy, nightmarish vision that wasn't quite in focus of people spasming on the street, and then the city, the government people cracking down. Then we went to Italy with the Ebola suits and the denial of reality, which is that this is an old population, air pollution is really bad, hospital system is not in great shape to begin with. And then we're in New York, the land of the hypochondriacal, if that's the right way to say it, neurotic, probably the center of the universe when it comes to that kind of person. I mean, maybe there's some other big cities that are worse, but New York's way up there. Everybody's sure they're catching something or dying or, it's just the way it is because it's a stressful city to live. Then they had the siren story and the mass grave story and the big container load full of dead bodies story, and then the big ship, but of course they didn't use the big ship, and then the big field hospital, but they didn't use the big field hospital. What they did do, and I'll put a link of that too, is in a few city hospitals, city-run hospitals, they were sending all the cases, or they were just jamming a lot of people into a few hospitals and killing them. I mean, I don't know how to find a point on it. They were basically murdering them with incompetence. So that's kind of what New York was, and then New York became the touchstone for the rest of the country. Everybody looked at New York, just like we looked at China and went, "Oh my God," right? And then we thought, "But that's China," you know. And then it happened in Italy. You're like, "Wait a minute, those people are like us," you know. And we're like, "Ooh, that's kind of scary." And then when it hit New York, then everybody in the whole nation lost their minds and thought, well, this is going to come to our town.
Yeah, and it became a thing where, like, when it first showed up in New Rochelle, a slightly north New York City, then Cuomo announced a quarantine, and the National Guard was going to be there, and they were going to be, handing out meals, but everybody assumed it was going to be, like, roadblocks and, the usual authoritarian stuff. That didn't end up happening, but what did end up happening was, you mentioned the nursing homes, and Cuomo literally had a executive order that nursing homes and elder care homes had to take patients from hospitals, not testing them, not doing any sort of screening to make sure they weren't going to infect and kill all the elderly. Just take them.
And no quarantining, no separation.
Yeah, no quarantining. And that killed tens of thousands of people. And it was New Jersey and Pennsylvania did the same thing. The UK was just exposed for doing the same thing. Amnesty International even put out a report, which, if you know how Amnesty International is the lapdog of the US and the UK, that's serious business. They don't usually bite the hand that feeds them, but that's a big deal. And yeah, the blanket DNR orders.
Do not resuscitate.
Yeah, do not resuscitate. And at least in the UK, a denial of food and water and medication, which is terrifying. I mean, as soon as you got a cough, it was like, okay, you're gone, bye, hurry up and die so we can have this bed. And it's like they didn't even get their hospital system overwhelmed. So that was the reason, supposedly, but that was completely bogus. And then, in the US, they were sending these people in, and there were videos going around even, and I think these were authentic because I can't imagine any legitimate propaganda purpose for them, but of this young guy who was put in this nursing home because he was discharged from a hospital, going around beating up the old people.
Yeah.
And it was like, why is this? I can't think of any legitimate propaganda purpose for that, but maybe there is one. I don't know. It seemed legitimate to me.
Yeah, no, I mean, They ran it as a news story, and it might have been an actual real news story. The nurse that I interviewed who worked in one of the Bronx hospitals said basically as soon as somebody died, they cleaned off the respirator and put another person on it right away. She said those respirators were never unused. They just kept cycling patients through them. That's something I'd love to get to the bottom of someday is who put the bug in Cuomo's whatever to scream about the need for respirators, because he was clearly the instigator of that. And they sure use those respirators. And I don't know, this is something people can listen to in the interview that I did with the nurse. People don't get, respirators not like, they don't put a little face mask on you. They jam pipes down into your lungs. They knock you out with paralytics and analgesics and a whole bunch, but anywhere from 6 to 20 different IV drips that are in you nonstop. You no longer get food, of course, because you can't eat. You no longer get water. I asked her, I said, how do these people get water? Well, there's fluid in the IV. So they're not getting fresh water for weeks on end, and they're wondering why people are dying, right? So when you put somebody on a respirator, you might as well kiss them goodbye. They might come back, but they're probably not going to.
Yeah, it's something like an 80% death rate even without COVID. I mean, they don't come back. It's a really a barbaric thing to be doing, honestly. But there's ventilator-assisted pneumonia or ventilator-associated pneumonia, assisted Freudian slip. But it's really, you're more likely to die from the ventilator than you are from the COVID, and yet I don't even know. I don't think it really started with Cuomo. Cuomo was the one who like really hyped it up and it got it into everybody's face. But I think the ventilator thing was around before that. This idea that these people were going to have to be on ventilators. If anything, it maybe came from Italy. I just remember hearing about it before Cuomo made a big deal out of it. Like, because there was already this fuss nationwide about, do we have enough ventilators? Do we have a stockpile of ventilators? Somebody was yelling at Trump because he didn't have the ventilators he could have had or something. And on Cuomo, too, he was supposedly supposed to order 16,000 ventilators and didn't do it. And he's terrible for every other reason, but that wasn't really one of them. But yeah, there was another thing. Yeah, the Spring Breakers. That was
right.
also around this time.
Right.
This was the start of the real like cult programming. They were really hammering it home. It wasn't just fear porn anymore. It was cult programming. So the sinners, the Spring Breakers, the people who went out and partied anyway. People went to the beach. College students went out to Cabo or wherever, and they came back and they all got COVID. Oh my God! And there was like all these like remorseful videos of these people. Oh, don't party like I did because now I'm really sick. I'm 20 years old and I'm gonna survive, and I just have the sniffles. But like, don't be like me. It's ridiculous.
We looked at a video together, maybe not in real time, but I sent it to you of a woman in Texas doing a deathbed statement. The claim was that she died later. She might have. And it was projected as if, oh, well, she just took up her little iPhone and turned on her Facebook and recorded this heartfelt thing. And then I looked at it and I realized, wow, she's got a steady hand for someone that's dying, because that camera was on a tripod, number one.
Was that the one where it looked like she was reading a statement?
Well, that's the other thing too. Her eyes are not just looking at the camera, but locked in a way that you only lock in when you're reading something, right? The other thing that was a little suspicious was she was talking in complete college essay style sentences.
That's what I mean by reading a statement, not just looking at the phone. The way that her statement was phrased, this is not something that was just off the cuff, like she was reading off something.
So we know that it was misrepresented. We know that it wasn't her holding up her iPhone giving her last will and testament. So there was a cameraman, probably a lighting person, maybe a makeup person. Somebody wrote the script. There must have been a teleprompter. I mean, we're talking about a crew in that room, right? So the gap between, she held up her iPhone and gave her last dying words, kind of a big. So then how did that video get on Facebook? How did it get 2 million views without getting shut down? Because, that's somebody dying. How can you show someone dying on Facebook? That's got to be a violation of all kinds of HIPAA rights and so on. But that somehow made it and got tremendous legs. And then it made it to the Today Show.
That's a dead giveaway right there. Nothing makes it to the Today Show unless it's seriously manufactured.
Oh, I saw. This was funny. I think I sent you the link. Fauci, went to Cornell, and so as an undergrad, I think, and he was interviewed by Cornell alumni, and the interviewer was, of course, an NBC Today Show hostess. I call her a hostess because it's pretty much what they are. Yeah. So I think people are getting a sense of the fact that this is a manufactured pageant. And if I were people, I don't know, have you seen the movie Wag the Dog?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Everybody might want
to
dust that off and watch that fellow again. Because I have a feeling it's a lot closer to reality than we realize, which is people sit back and they think of like planning out a movie. Like a movie is a sequence of events. First something has to happen, then another thing. You have to establish characters. You have to establish a plot line. You have to have, a friend of mine used to say, the formula for a successful movie is 5 minutes of dialogue, 5 minutes of fist fight, 5 minutes of dialogue, 5 minutes of car chase, 5 minutes of dialogue, 5 minutes of explosions. So somebody had to plan out these dramatic scenarios and make sure that they were aired, and not just aired once, but aired all day and all night. by all.
I mean, there were a bunch of these reformed spring breakers. There were a bunch of these reformed COVID deniers. That was a really fun one. There were all these like morbidly obese men. They were like pretty much to a person, morbidly obese, and they all said, I thought COVID was a hoax, and now I'm dying, and this is why I'm able to talk and tweet and all of this thing. I'm dying. And like they were like 500 pounds, and there was a bunch of them too. And then there was like one guy who was like a relatively fit, like young gay dude, and he was like, oh yeah, I thought it was a joke, and I went out and partied, and then I died. Oh wait, no, I'm still alive. But I was really sick. And they're so like phony because they all follow the same exact line. And there was one guy who actually did die, who they tried to then pin on him. Oh well, his dying words were, I was wrong, it's not a hoax. Well, actually, we don't actually know if he said it was a hoax, or we don't actually know what he said before he died. So this is just some third party who is claiming this man. And it was never really like brought to a satisfactory conclusion who this guy was and who these people were who were saying these were his last words. They just, I mean, once you died, they were able to use you for everything. There were actually a lot of families that came forward and said, my grandmother did not die of COVID, or my grandfather died of Alzheimer's or something, and whose people were used against their will. And there was a kid, for one thing, who appeared in 3 different countries stories.
Oh, my goodness.
The one problem with COVID is that it doesn't hurt kids, basically. I mean, maybe a few, but not really. And there was this kid who appeared in at least 3 stories that I saw, possibly more, in Portugal, Belgium, and I think the UK. So he was a COVID victim, and he was 9 years old, or he was 14 years old, maybe he was 8. We don't really know, but he died of COVID because, that's all purpose. I mean, and people have been caught using gunshot deaths or suicides. Motorcycle accident in Florida, that was a big one because the health director down there, some health official at least, actually said, well, we don't actually know if the COVID caused the motorcycle accident, so we're just going to leave that one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, someone in the UK pointed out that if you got a COVID test and it came out positive, and you died of anything within the next 30 days, including gunshot, falling down off a building, you were a COVID death instantly.
Yeah, I mean, for a while it wasn't even that. It was if you died at all. And then they fixed that and like, whoopsie, okay, well that knocks 10,000 deaths off or something. It was a pretty sizable number, but they still kept it like 30 days. So yeah, that's what the kind of fraud you're dealing with.
There was something really, really sinister. I don't know if I sent you this one. It was very recent. The guy that runs some kind of sketchy health consultant company in Liverpool, which is a sketchy place to begin with, was saying, that spike in suicides, that is COVID psychosis. I kid you not. And he literally said to the paper, well, I don't want to get into all the details with you right now, but we've crunched the numbers, and based on a study that was done, it shows that blah blah blah. So I found the study that and indeed people who were in the throes of whatever this disease was they had, some of them were having psychological problems. None of them were suicidal. That word never came up in the scientific paper, and they were all over 60. So how do you explain and this is the tragedy also not reporting is propaganda. My understanding, and I have one clip of it from this got out somehow, suicide rates among the young are higher than ever as soon as this madness started. So anyway, that's a sinister little meme that so far hasn't yet gotten traction, but that there's COVID psychosis that causes people to kill themselves.
Yeah, during the early days, there was a few articles that slipped out in like small outlets. Like in Tennessee, there were a few articles about how had been more deaths by suicides than there had been at COVID because of the lockdowns. And then in California, some doctor came out around like maybe June or something and said there's been more suicides than we've ever seen in our entire like course of practicing. This is insane. This lockdown has to stop. And in Australia, there was a group that said, well, we've crunched the numbers, and if this lockdown continues, we're going to see like multiple times more suicides than are actually dying under COVID. And I mean, Australia is a whole thing unto itself. If anybody knows what's going on in Melbourne and Victoria right now, it's completely insane. Like they're worse than even, I mean, Wuhan had the record for being the most restrictive, but actually Dictator Dan down there has surpassed what they were doing in Wuhan with no cases to show for it. I mean, the deaths numbers is still in, I believe, the 3 digits. But what's interesting is that once he locked down, death numbers went through the roof. Okay, so you would think that would like make you think that maybe it doesn't work so well. But, oh no, we're just going to take the powers to indefinitely detain you for no reason other than that you're a high-risk person, aka you've been exposed to somebody who tested positive for COVID. Okay, you're using a PCR test that doesn't do shit. And so somebody who has been exposed to COVID could be like literally anybody who's had any contact with a person who has ever had a cold in their lives, and now you're indefinitely detained. Congratulations. That sucks.
Yeah, that's why I'm not giving medical advice here, but I'm personally not going to get tested. And if I go to a restaurant, I mean, I've been to restaurants up here and they want to do, hey, can we have your name and address for contact tracing? I said, if you require that, you just lost my business. So I'm just telling you what I'm doing, folks. I'm not cooperating with that, because what could happen if you do is someday there may be somebody at your door with a clipboard telling you, you sat a table away from someone that had COVID and we're going to stick something up your nose right now to see if you've got it. Do you have any objections?
Yeah, and they will actually be showing up at your door. I mean, in Birmingham, UK right now, they're going around, military is going around with health officials, of course, testing people. And now you might say, oh, well, it's voluntary. You can always say no. Okay, so you're going to say no to a bunch of armed dudes with a COVID test, and you're going to say no to that. A bunch of military guys, you're just going to tell them to come back another time. A lot of people can't do that. It's a little intimidating.
I want to tell people that, everybody has interaction with cops. Military people are a different level. They are a lot scarier.
Yeah.
Like you may be able to feel like you can talk a cop out of hassling you. These guys, you're not going to talk out. So is Birmingham, UK, not Birmingham, Alabama?
Yeah, Birmingham, UK.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's good. That's good. I'm glad we don't have it here yet. But
actually, we did back in. I put this in the book in.
Oh yeah, let's talk about your book. Or the book that you have a chapter in. Wait, show it.
Yeah.
Show this so people can see the title.
Cynthia McKinney's When China Sneezes.
When China Sneezes. God bless Cynthia McKinney.
Chapter 13. That's mine. But I mentioned it in there, and I wrote this back in March and April, so this happened a while ago. But the Dallas, I think it's Travis County in Texas, they had National Guards going around door to door. They were given the ability to do this. I don't know if they actually did this, but the emergency order gave them the ability to go door to door and check that quarantine was being followed. So, I mean, I don't know how many other counties had that. I know for a while, Rhode Island was the first one to threaten to do that to New Yorkers back when New York was the epicenter of the pandemic. And then Cuomo threatened to sue her. And then 6 short months later, it's been like the opposite. Like now New York has got all these checkpoints, and they're going to check to make sure that you're quarantining if you came from half the country, basically more than half the country. I think they had like 29 states at some point. If you were coming to New York from one of these 29 states, you can expect a visit from whoever to make sure that the address you gave for your contact tracing is real. I mean, if I was a person who is not me, I would say, well, just give them a fake address and fake phone number. But that probably would be illegal, so I would never suggest something like that.
There you go. Follow the law at all times. Follow it twice on Sundays as well. Yeah, so I don't find a whole lot of conversations going on like the one you and I are having right now. What I find instead is people responding to the outrage of the day, which is understandable, and people responding to the lie of the day, and then people getting involved in these really esoteric statistical analysis thing. Well, I did a regression analysis and it's really only 0.02, not point. And it's like all that stuff's important. I'm not going to understate it. But what's missing, in my opinion, and maybe I'm missing it from the so-called resistance, is just this common sense observation that this thing was staged from day one by people who are known to stage things. For example, something that you and I've talked about before, which is this is very similar to AIDS. So, for example, if you took a test, an HIV test, which was PCR based and bogus, and you were, what's that word? You're in the subject group, you're in the at-risk group. So in other words, if a heterosexual truck driver took an HIV test, it would be interpreted differently than if a young gay male took an HIV test.
And it also depends on where you're located geographically. If you're in Africa,
right,
it's like you're much more likely to be diagnosed with AIDS than if you're in Canada.
But they would also do things like, if you were a gay male, they would just more likely find you to be someone that needed AZT. So it's the same thing here. It's like, oh, are you in an at-risk group for COVID? You know.
Yeah, New York, they were, and I believe they still are. They've included presumed COVID deaths in the body count, which is why New York has such a high body count, because it's not like people are running around dropping dead of COVID. It's people are, maybe they coughed before they died and they'll, presumed COVID, because, we just don't have enough tests, or there are all kinds of excuses they came up with. But like even back in April, they were saying, okay, well, we've just started reclassifying all respiratory illnesses as COVID. So, just go about your business and don't cough, because you're going to be included in this. And obviously there are so many people who are interested in falsifying these death certificates, because they get $39,000 from the government if they have a COVID death in their hospital. And same if they, I think it's the same figure if they put somebody on a ventilator, but it's a large number. It's a 5-figure number as compared to a much smaller number if they do not diagnose the magical COVID. So
I think there's one number if you give them a COVID diagnosis, and then there's a big jackpot if you put them on a ventilator.
Yeah, it's like $36,000.
It's up there. Yeah, it's way up there. And I'm wondering in this, and I'm just looking at the city hospitals. They've just had, they need to raise revenue, or they think they do. Here's a way to raise revenue, because the nurse that I interviewed said people were put on respirators or on ventilators who clearly didn't have COVID. They had anxiety attacks, they had asthma attacks. Yeah. Young people in their 30s. I have it on tape. And this is a serious woman. This is somebody that was in the military over in Iraq. And then when she got out, she became a nurse and has, 10, 15 years of nursing under her belt. And interestingly enough, was a nurse in Florida treating COVID patients. Nobody died. Went to New York City. Everybody died.
Everybody died. This was Nicole?
Is that, no, the other one, Erin.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And I'll make sure I have that one posted too. I always give the listeners a lot of homework to do after these interviews.
With the ventilators and the hospital payments is that Cuomo, over his years as governor, has cut hospital budgets to the bone. New York has had its hospital budget cut so hard.
Your audio is breaking up. Hang on.
Oh, great. I'm probably still talking about Cuomo. Can you hear me now? Yes, no?
It's super staticky.
Huh. That's really weird. I don't know.
Just unplug it and plug it back in again. See if that cleans it out. Try.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's gone. It's
nice.
Good.
All right. So Cuomo has cut hospitals to the bone budget-wise over how long has he even been in office? I mean, 19 years or something like that?
Way too long.
Not 19 years. No, that's ridiculous. But like 9 years. I can never remember if it's 9 or 19. It seems like it's been forever, though. That primate-faced schmuck is like such. Actually, that's an insult to primates. I shouldn't say that. Sorry, primates.
It's not fair to gorillas. I was going to call you out on that earlier.
Really nice, but Cuomo is a piece of shit, and he has cut hospital budgets to the bone so hard, and avoided any sort of measure that could have raised revenues without further inconveniencing anybody. I mean, there was lots of public support for putting an extra 1% tax on the super, super rich. But those guys are his biggest supporters, so he's not going to do that. No, better just cut Medicaid again, cut hospital budgets again, and then, oops, here we have a pandemic. And he's, with his hand out, begging for money from Trump. It's like, dude, you know, you could get a lot of money out of these people, and you didn't, so now you're gonna pretend that you're being wronged. He's literally like threatened Trump, like, gee, this is an awful nice state I have here. Sure would be a shame if anything happened to it, knowing that Trump like has his house and family here. I mean, not right now because he's in the White House, but he's a New York guy, and he doesn't want to see anything happen to this state, but they're both playing chicken with each other, and it's disgusting. It's like, how the hell is Cuomo still in office and not tarred and feathered and hanging upside down in the public square?
I can't.
Not that I would recommend anything
No,
like
my
that.
goodness, that's
That would be illegal.
That's a historical reference to the 18th century. We would not recommend anything like that today.
No, that'd be wrong.
It's interesting about the hospital cuts. Apparently, Northern Italy had a similar experience. They were undoing their social medicine program and privatizing it because they were running out of money, and that's how they were going to handle it. And that's why the number of hospital beds per capita was about as low as you could possibly have in the developed world, and the only lower place is New York, and America. By the way, the lowest for hospital beds per capita, Washington State, which also had a big problem, and New York State.
Yeah, no, under Cuomo, the number of hospital beds has fallen by something like 11,000, or I wrote an article with the exact number, but I don't know it off the top of my head. Maybe we can include it in the links. But yeah, it's really ridiculous. And the UK too, like as we were talking before we went live, they're intent on privatizing their NHS. And so the idea is to get people to distrust it so heavily by, culling the elderly. I mean, somebody sent me something this morning actually that really just made everything click, because they were talking about how this was talking about the Liverpool Protocol, which is this end-of-life thing that basically they put you on morphine and then you sail off into that grand darkness. But they're obviously doing it to people who are in no way ready to go off this mortal coil. And because health workers are not taught any sort of creativity, so when somebody comes up with a new thing, the only thing they have is I'm mangling the quote, but it's they have it there, and ritual, culling the elderly to save yourself from the scary, scary virus that is going to kill us all. I mean, it made sense. It made a lot of sense.
And that was sort of, going back again to the AIDS era. AIDS was presented as this unbelievably deadly disease. Everybody was going to get it, and everybody was freaking out. Doctors were freaking out. Nurses were freaking out. They didn't even want to be on the same floor. I remember a friend of mine had to go to the hospital for something else, and this was in the 80s, and he was freaked out of his mind that there were AIDS patients in the hospital. He was sure that he was going to get it. So this turning of these quote COVID patients, and how many of them actually had COVID is a whole another debate, but turning them into these unbelievably toxic, death-dealing entities is another part of this that they worked out 36 years ago. I see, and we've talked about this before, and I've made some films on it. This is just a playbook. Now they played it out in a very particular way, starting in China, going to northern Italy, coming to New York, and spring break. That was a good one. I forgot about that. That was a very important part of it, because it showed those evil young people. How dare they get together?
Self-flagellatory thing. I mean, I've written extensively about how this is a cult, and a very important part of a good cult, at least, is starving the senses, and joy is bad, and socializing is bad, and at least socializing people outside the cult. Having fun is bad. This is why Cuomo put an order back in August saying no live music performances, no charging money for live music performances, and no previously advertised live music performances. So it's like the numbers in New York are going way down. But okay, we have to stop all enjoyment of music. Music is one of the most fundamental things that human beings, it doesn't hurt anybody. I mean, you were talking earlier about, they were saying that singing was spreading the virus,
right,
that we have to stop singing. And Boris Johnson over in the UK has tried to stop singing and dancing. It's like, dude, are you some kind of like boogeyman out of a movie or something? This is insane.
It's Taliban shit.
Yeah, literally. At least in the Taliban, you get to blow stuff up.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, they should let us, let us do
No,
that.
don't say that.
No. We didn't say. I didn't. I mean, that was meant for entertainment purposes only. Um,
Metaphorically blow things up.
was that
Metaphorically blow things up.
metaphorically? But it is. It is. I mean, if we heard that there was a regime that banned religious gatherings and banned music and banned dancing and banned conversation, we would think, wow, what a psycho group of people. But
Yeah, and there was a UK pub that even banned lingering eye contact.
oh, I remember that.
Somebody said that was a joke, but I don't think that was a joke.
I don't think so.
No, nobody has a sense of humor anymore. That was the first thing to die of the corona or the OMFG virus.
Yeah. But I'm just a lot. It's like everybody's sort of jumping on this thing. Like if you're anti-capitalist, and God knows there's an infinite number of things to complain about when it comes to capitalism. But people who do that for a living, that's all they do. I mean, they love this because this is proof that the capitalist system doesn't work. Well, we didn't need COVID
Yeah,
to
but
show that maybe
joking.
predatory capitalism is not the ideal way to organize human society. But for some reason, they love this COVID thing because it's proof of the seams, the tearing seams of the capitalist system. I mean, we've talked. I won't mention the names, but so many people that I thought were semi-intelligent leftists, I realize now I don't even know what to call them. I can't even say they're beyond stupid.
Well, I call them corona cultists. I mean, like,
Okay.
I really do. This checks off every single box of, like, Stephen Hassan, who's a former Mooney and, like, a Unitarian Universalist Church, Mooney cult. He used to be in the Moonies, and he's written a lot about cults. And if you read his book, Combating Cult Mind Control, like, he's got, like, a list of maybe 20 or so, or 30 cult characteristics. This checks every single one of them. I've even made a graphic with a little coronavirus on it so that people like know what it's about, and
Oh,
it's every single one.
Oh.
You can't really I mean, and then they've caught on to this actually, because I've noticed the trolls on Twitter have started saying, "Oh, well, you must be a cultist because you don't want to wear a mask or something." Like they've started trying to say that the people who are not them are the cultists.
right.
So they get it, but they're turning it back on you because of course they're doing that, and it's just like so predictable and so like teeth gratingly annoying, and it's just sometimes you wonder, can you even save these people? But I mean, if your loved ones are in this cult, you want to get them out, just like you would any other crazy like suicidal cult. Like I'm waiting for these people to go all Jonestown, and literally, I mean, I came up with something a couple weeks ago, which I think I shared with you, but I can't recall. Kill yourself before Corona does.
Okay.
And, I'm waiting for that. I'm waiting for that.
It could be the next part of the pageant. Hey, if you would send me that article that you wrote with the diagram. Is that you have a diagram of that?
Yeah.
People may not be aware, but everybody's aware that there's advertising and there's advertising agencies and there's PR agencies and all that. And I think people have this vision of a bunch of happy-go-lucky, fun-loving people coming up with crazy ideas to advertise products. And yeah, that definitely goes on. But there's also a lot of really sinister, heavy-duty mind control technology that is being studied and used in the selling of products and definitely in the selling of ideas. Any serious marketing person worth their chops is completely familiar with everything that cults do. I'm talking about the high level people. And they love Scientology, not because they love Scientology, but they're so impressed by Scientology's cult organization and their systematic way of breaking people down and basically, I mean, it's the dream of every unsavory marketer to create a cult following for his or her products. And they use these things. It's not like an accidental, hey, we accidentally did a few things that made people behave like cult members. No, and cults don't form spontaneously. Like there's technology, and I don't mean things you stick in people's brains. I mean procedural, conversational, scenario-based technologies.
Yeah, since the 1950s, they've had the thought reform, criteria for thought reform. This has been public knowledge, and people who have bad ends in mind for these people, they use these things, and they observe what other cults are doing, and they pick up tips and tricks, and that they don't work together. I don't think there's any like cult leaders conference unless you consider like maybe Davos, but not really. It's like they only are getting better at their craft, and we have to be constantly on our guard, because a lot of people, like, one of the reasons why there's so much hostility in response to trying to tell people about, hey, maybe putting a piece of cloth around your face is not going to stop a microscopic particle from, like, just sauntering into your nose or whatever. But the reason people get so angry in this is because they feel that these are their deeply held beliefs. They've been convinced they don't really have deeply held beliefs because they're so alienated. They don't really understand. And this is the video that I sent you, my lecture from back in January, is that this idea of like getting people to turn against their neighbors and fear their neighbors and everything is the end stage of alienation. If we're finally alienated from ourselves because we can't even trust ourselves,
right?
If we aren't careful, we're going to get infected, and we're going to go infect somebody else, and then we're a thought criminal. A criminal. I don't know. But it's reaching the end stages of that. And then once they have that, they'll convince you, okay, the only way out of this terrible cognitive dissonance you found yourself in, because you want to go back to work, and you want to make money, and you want to be able to not be, like, destitute and having to go to the food bank every day and wait in line for hours and hours. You've seen these videos of these people stretched, like, miles waiting for a food bank that's totally going to run out of food before you get there. But you have to stay home and just, hunker down, as Fauci says, and wait for the vaccine savior. So if you don't go with that, then you're a bad person. And so you must, atone, wear the mask, yell at your neighbor who's not wearing the mask. And this is why people get upset, because they're already so much, like, scattered from all of this cognitive dissonance. They know this is terrible for them. They know because they're feeling a growling of their belly or just loneliness from not being able to see their friends and family. And yet they're supposed to just hunker down.
Right.
It's psychosis inducing. So yeah, there is a COVID psychosis, but it's not with that guy you were talking about.
Right.
It's got nothing to do with getting the virus. It's more having to do with society being a virus at this point.
That talk, which we broadcast last week, that was in Scotland that you gave? What was that at? What was the event?
It was called Deep Reset, actually, which is funny because the name is so similar to the Great Reset. But it was like a deep reset, like trying to reset the moribund, like, death society into something that was healthy for all of its participants.
And you did that. That was in January.
Yeah, it was a small thing. I don't think that if you look it up online, you're probably not going to find much. But yeah, there was maybe 20 of us, and just sharing information and sharing strategies and trying to fix the world. Didn't really work, but I did, before the pandemic was a worldwide thing, kind of point out that was one of the ways for them to get their regime in place. I don't really relish being right about that, but here we are.
Yeah, well, we're going to post that to this page. So we're going to have hours and hours of supplementary material to this interview, because unfortunately, it does take time and study to deconstruct this stuff and understand it. I think a lot of people have good instincts and know they're being scammed, and maybe that's all you really need, just to know. Personally, I like to see all the gears and bells and whistles and see how they actually did it, so that I'm thoroughly sure that this in fact is a scam. So
this is why I always include so many links in my articles, is that I want people to be able to both check up on what I've done and follow those particular rabbit holes further if they want to go into any particular point that I've made and research it themselves, because I think that's really, we need to work together. There's no possible way that, given the sheer amount of resources and funds they have at their disposal, like, we have to work together, because there's no way that one person can do this all on their own.
Yeah, there's no way. And, and speaking of resources, you have to understand, for instance, Fauci alone, I don't know how many employees he has, but I know he has 8 departments under him, and each department has its own full-time communications director. He personally has a communications director and a deputy communications director. So that's 80 hours. I mean, you know how much work you put out in a week, right? So imagine if you had two people just producing bullshit for you 50 weeks a year. And those are the directors. We don't know who. They might have I'm sure they have a staff of underlings doing work. So we might be looking at Fauci alone having command of anywhere from 20 to 100 full-time communications people at NIH alone. That's a pretty big staff, right? And then realize that if Helen Beninsky calls CNN and wants to share some insights, they ain't going to listen to you. They're not going to take your call, right? Right. But if Fauci calls up and says, I think the next pandemic's coming from Mars, he's going to be on and they're going to listen to him and let him talk. So not only does he have this huge staff of people, just him alone, forget CDC, forget World Health Organization, forget all the PR companies or the pharmaceutical companies. I mean, that's a whole nother army of people, right? But they also have they're wired right into the mass media. There's seamless connection. Whereas even if you had a PhD, not forget PhD, if you had a Nobel Prize, Helen, in biostatistics, immunology, and epidemiology, you still wouldn't be on TV.
Yep.
Because
they shut them out. The wrong thinkers get shut out no matter how many qualifications they have, no matter how many books they've published or how many prizes they've won. I mean, they've really, because, listen to, and this is maybe a cheap shot, but if you look at Dr. Michael Ryan of the WHO, that guy does not look healthy at all. That guy looks like he's like, I don't know, like his liver is like this big and he's about to keel over. But this is the guy who's telling us this is an infodemic. You cannot, don't think for yourself because you're going to die if you do. And that's the implication of something like infodemic. That sounds like fatal. And there are all these articles going around, like Forbes had one, don't do your own research on science because you don't understand science. Science is hard. It was like the headline was literally like, don't do your own research or something like that, or don't try to do your own research. It was really like, I thought it was a satire when I saw the title, but it wasn't. And that's the problem, is that nothing is satire anymore. Every joke you could make is reality already. And I mean, that's a very disturbing place to be.
What's interesting about that is last year at this time, they were pushing the measles pandemic, and they were also simultaneously disappearing huge, well-established health information websites that had been up for decade plus, that were very legit. Google used to rank you based on how many legitimate links you had pointing to you. So if you put up a website on a particular topic and thousands of people were pointing to you, including educational institutions, including professors, including MDs, Google would think, hey, this guy knows what he's talking about. So there are people that over the years had established that kind of credibility organically, legitimately, and Google just took them out last summer. And now everything is Mayo Clinic, Johns Hopkins, our friends at Johns Hopkins, MedInfo, WebMD. That's the answer to every medical question that you ever have now. And because in search results, if it's not on page one, 99% of the population's not going to go any deeper. But you know what? Even if you go deeper now, you can't find stuff. So it's interesting. They cleared the field last year before we got to this point.
Yeah, and the problem with Google is that, like, even if you use another search engine, 98% of the population or whatever it is uses Google. And so, like, those other sites that are not on Google start to go down in the rankings. So even the sites that still use, like, the proper rankings, they get the fallout effect. So, like, I mean, I generally use DuckDuckGo. And, I mean, there are other sites. There are plenty of them. Don't use Startpage, though, because that's just Google anonymized. Like, there's really no point. Google is like, at this point, it's just like reaching out blindly in the dark and plucking something out. And it's probably going to have nothing to do with what you're looking for. It might have some of the same words if you're lucky, but chances are it's like media establishment garbage, and you'd be really better off reading like your cereal box or something. It's so idiotic. But yeah, DuckDuckGo, the video search is terrible. Their image search, no, but the regular search, it's about as good as you're going to get as far as I've used. But still, it's going down in quality because the rankings are going down because they can't be accessed by Google. And I should know, my site has been blacklisted by every search engine basically since I first had it. Although now I think the new version is like, I mean, knock on wood, at least immune to the problems that it was having before. But it's like, I don't know. I don't ever expect to see my own stuff on any search engine. Annoying.
Yeah, the only way I find my stuff is I have to search, I have to search the domain in the search query and the topic, then I might come up. But it doesn't matter how many million, like I haven't had a lot, but I've had a couple of multi-million video views. Good luck. Well, a lot of them are just gone. They've just been taken off. This was years ago. This was I experienced all this stuff 08, 09, I had a video that it kept moving around, and every time it would land somewhere, it landed on Google, on Canada Yahoo. And had 5 million views before they took it down. Every place it landed, it got amazing, but then it just, so I don't know, frustrating. But yeah, so we do our best. We put lots of links so people can follow up. It's very important everybody to share this with as many people as you can. I have a whole long list here of links we're going to put underneath the video so that you can follow up. Especially, I'd love to see that cult article with the diagram of the coronavirus.
You can even read it on the actual MelaninofDestroy.com website now that it's back up. At least let me go and check right now that it's back up.
It's still there, right?
I would feel like a real idiot if I was talking about how great it is that it's back up and then it's not, but this computer is so slow. No, I've had problems with it for at least a month. It's been mostly offline, and then I finally got it back up, and it's made me happy because it really sucks to oh yeah, you just go to my website. Oh wait, you can't. So
yeah.
Looks like it's there. Maybe. No, don't do this. My computer is really slow. Oh, here it is. Yes.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yes.
Well, great. We'll put a link to your website, also to that page on cults, to your Twitter channel, which I follow. A lot of videos that we've referenced. I'm very encouraged to hear that. I'm amazed that Amnesty International is paying attention.
That's a good sign, because that means that maybe some of these other organizations are going to, okay, they did it first, now we can do it, because there's so much to find. I mean, nobody wants to go after Cuomo because he's against Trump and everybody's against Trump. It's like, hello, he still killed how many tens of thousands of people? This is idiotic.
Did you see The Nation came out with an article on the untoward influence of Gates on scientific research? That was a recent article. Yeah, I was shocked because
I saw CJR maybe, or some Columbia something. One of the Columbia people did, but I didn't see Nations.
Nation came out and I was really surprised because that's one of the groups that's gotten a ton of money from Fauci. I mean, not from Fauci, from might as well be from Fauci, but it's from Gates. Yeah, that's maybe we'll leave it on that point. I'll put a link to the film. I made this film called "Pay No Attention to That Man Behind the Curtain." It's a nice short film, 15 minutes long, and the core of it at the end is the research that Helen did, which just shows this just endless list of media outlets that's not received a few bucks, million, 2 million, 3 million from the Gates Foundation.
Yeah, and that's only what they're telling. And what interests me is that, in the last few months, they've removed most of that from their website. So it makes me wonder what was there before that I saw. But I saw it, this was maybe 5 months ago.
I think it was May. I think it was dated May, yeah.
What was there before that? I mean, was there more? I really wouldn't be surprised, because I know that there have been a few deep digs into Gates' influence on media, and while a lot of them were quashed or a lot of them were neutered, some of them were actually useful. I mean, that Columbia one that I was talking about, which I have somewhere on my Twitter, but like people are starting to notice no matter how many he pays off. The thing is that you have to pay off literally everyone if you want to shut them up. Because otherwise somebody's going to start paying attention and realize, okay, just because everybody else is not talking about this doesn't mean I can't.
Well, that's why I was really surprised at The Nation, because it's like, gee, you guys aren't getting any more, you're not getting any more Gates money, but maybe they found their conscience. I didn't do a total. Probably be an interesting thing, but just from the pages that you showed, which may not even be complete, right? There may be whole stuff we don't even know about. There's a lot of soft stuff too, like if Gates gives you an airline ticket to come from Auckland, New Zealand to New York and stay at the Ritz for a week to go to a conference, where's that listed? Maybe it's not listed anywhere.
Yeah, and a lot of fellowships too.
A lot of fellows.
Those things.
Somebody nailed, because now while Gates is working this vaccine thing, he's also working a GMO glyphosate thing in Africa. Yeah. And Cornell University has a program on their campus where they bring fellows from Africa to teach them how to explain the benefits of GMOs and glyphosate to African farmers. That's another Gates initiative. So
he's pissed off because they're not all dying of COVID. That was what he was hyping in the beginning. Is like, oh yeah, this is really gonna cut a swath through Africa and blah blah blah. And it's like, well, no, actually, in Africa they have hydroxychloroquine because they have malaria, and
right.
It makes sense. But he didn't really pick up on that, so he was all, oh, they're all gonna die, and we need to give me billions of dollars so I can help them. And it's like, if you make more money in philanthropy than you do in selling an operating system that has been like shoehorned in every computer from here to eternity, then it's not philanthropy, dude. It's profiteering. You can call it whatever you like, but you're making money off human suffering.
By the way, his latest, and I tweeted it, and I can't remember, he was interviewed somewhere very recently, and he basically said two things. We won't return to normal until late 2022? I don't know. It was some crazed.
Late 2021, if it's the one that I'm thinking.
Okay, maybe it's late. Maybe it's late 20. Okay, so
the vaccine was going to be there, and that was going to precipitate the return to normal.
But in the meantime, he needed a couple of $1 trillion for the global vaccine program. It's like just a couple of trillion.
We need to think about who we can use to sell the vaccine to the people, because America has this anti-vaxxer problem, and we need to find trusted people who we can use to convince those silly reactionaries that they are really better off including my genetic material in their DNA.
What I've noticed, and it's kind of disturbing, is I follow Wall Street stuff really closely, and I'm knowledgeable about it, and they're all just waiting for the vaccine. And it's turning into a simple equation. It's like, well, if we don't have a vaccine, it's going to cost us $20 trillion in lost economic activity. So let's spend the $2 trillion to get the global vaccination program. You know what I mean? And that's not an accident that they set that up. And I'm railing against these guys every day. I keep harassing them, saying, when do you wake up and realize? You know what's really weird too is, like, the Christmas retail season, whatever you think about the misappropriation of the Christmas spirit, commercially, that's when most businesses actually go into the black for the first time. Like, you spend the whole year just spinning your wheels and praying and holding everything together, and then Christmas comes, everybody goes wild, spends money like drunken sailors, and you're profitable for the year. They're setting up to kill the Christmas retail season. So all these small businesses that have already, so many of them have been destroyed, but the ones that are standing on one leg, if they don't get a good Christmas season, they're dead. So whatever the death rate has been for businesses, it's going to be double, triple, quadruple. I don't know. What then? That's that
up because CDC has said, okay, there's going to be no Thanksgiving, there's going to be no Black Friday. of course, Black Friday is the biggest shopping day of the year.
Yeah.
And I mean, Thanksgiving, okay, so you haven't seen your family all year because you've been locked down or you haven't been able to travel. You want to at least see your family for Thanksgiving, but they're saying, oh, nope, can't do that. Nope, that's bad, that's wrong. Better not do it. And I mean, depending on where you live, you might not actually be able to do it because they might not let you in. But no Black Friday, that's going to mean death for all these businesses, because no Black Friday means there's not going to be a Christmas, because this is setting the stage. I mean, maybe someone will wake up and make that not happen, but I don't see that. I mean, Robert Redfield, the CDC guy, he's totally with the program. He's although he did make a little slip up the other day and saying masks are great. Masks work so well that they're even better than a vaccine. And then he said, and he was like, "Oops, I mean, they're like almost as good as a vaccine. Oh, I fucked up. Yeah." So he's totally with the program, but it's just funny because like nobody wants to wear these things on their face, and like Wisconsin is trying to manufacture a case spike now, and so they're talking about how we're going to open up this field hospital outside Milwaukee that we built in April, but we never got to use because there was never actually any plague. But now they're opening it up, and so that's because they have a lawsuit right now against their mandatory mask policy. So they got to get people good and scared, because otherwise they're going to take their masks off, and then they might stop being afraid. Because the thing is, the mask is not only a religious talisman, which again I have written about extensively, but it's also a constant reminder that you're supposed to be afraid,
right,
that your neighbor is your enemy, that everybody is infectious, that you're going to die if you don't obey. So, I mean, it's a very potent visual symbol, and not just in the cult sense. It's also just a psychological, constant reminder. You must always know this is not normal. You are in a different system. You must obey or you will perish. So, once that goes away, and you don't have, it's a lot harder to keep people under control, I think.
Yep. And then, of course, the photos emerged a couple of months ago. You probably saw them a long time ago, but I had forgotten. They put all the Gitmo patients in masks years ago, and it had nothing to do with the public health thing, because the guards weren't wearing them. So I don't know. I don't know what it's going to take for certain people to just wake up and just see this stuff. But I guess we'll just keep chipping away. But you're right. Once it's like deprogramming a cult member.
Yep, exactly. That's what.
But I mean, can we kidnap? I mean, I'm not recommending this. This is just for entertainment purposes only. I mean, we can't kidnap all these people and bring them somewhere and deprogram them. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't know what it's going to take. But the thing that kills me is and I'm the professional left. I call them professional leftists now. They seem to see no problem with small business in America being absolutely destroyed, and I don't get it, because small business employs a lot of people. A lot of people eat because they have a job with a small business, and a lot of families eat because they own a small business. And they're not going to be able to eat if they don't have a small business, because the reason they have a small business is maybe they're not employable in the Fortune 500, like immigrants and, people that just want to go their own way. So I thought, I don't know, but the leftists just seem to think this is great. It's going to...
This is, I mean, you say professional leftists. The thing is, the professional leftists are not leftists. They're these neoliberal schmucks who, long ago, I mean, now this is a theory, so I don't have everything to back this up, but I did I did a speech about this at the Left Forum, back in, I think, 2017 or something, but on the theory that these social justice warrior types, the ones who are making the left toxic to everybody but the biggest ideological psychopaths, are not actually with the left. They're out to destroy the left, and they do so by amplifying the most toxic elements of the left, such as this need. Diversity is great. Everybody should accept people of other types, of other ethnicities, races, genders, whatever. But making it this totalitarian thing where you must have. I mean, all of these universities coming out with like new segregation. Somebody's having a good laugh at this. This is not organic. This is not coming out of, oh, just left liberals being all weird. No, liberals, I mean, the whole liberal ideology is like about free speech and about, sharing of ideas. And not anymore. Obviously, the word has come to mean something very different, but this is not coming from the left. This is a lot of people on the left have been duped by it, and a lot of people on the left are doing it because they're followers. But didn't come from the left originally. This was a calculated effort to destroy the left, and I think it's done a pretty good job.
Fantastic!
What the left has become, no way. So I mean, yeah, maybe now it's these professional leftists. Some of them actually originated on the left, but a lot of them came through this Democratic Party system, this Netroots. I was talking to an activist in St. Louis who saw Black Lives Matter in its infancy come in and take over the Ferguson protest after Michael Brown was shot. And there was a lot of people who were there who were genuinely like local activists who were against police brutality. But then these people come in from like Los Angeles, or I think that's where they were from. But these three women who now are the leadership of Black Lives Matter and have zillions of dollars. But they just came in, sucked up all the money and all the energy and took up all the airtime and left. And everybody's still suffering under the hands of a police force that's overly brutal and has all this overly militarized and still broke and still in the ghetto. And okay, so Black Lives Matter is now world famous, and now every corporation must swear fealty to them.
Right.
But I mean, guaranteed 99% of Black people in the United States are not benefiting from this.
Guaranteed. And it's so absurd that you walk down the street or drive through town and all you see are Black Lives Matter signs. Among people who I know don't know maybe have never met a black person in their lives, and certainly have never done anything to help disadvantaged black people, but they've got this cult-like dedication to Black Lives Matter. It's like I don't get it. I don't get it.
At least in New York, it's kind of like a Passover thing. Like, you must smear the lamb's blood on your door, or they're going to come and kick in your windows. And the thing is that the ones rioting in New York, it's all white kids.
Exactly.
And rich white kids, even. Like, there was this, like, an heiress, son of a famous comic book writer. There was like a crew of 8 that got arrested breaking windows in Manhattan, and they were all rich people, young rich kids, because they've never had to answer for their actions in their lives. And that's the interesting part, is because accountability is a problem in both cases. The cops who are shooting black people or shooting any people, I mean, it's not just black people who are getting shot by cops, are not having accountability, and they never are punished for their actions. And the rich kids who break windows, never punished for their actions. So it's like, you two guys have more in common than you might think. And perhaps that's why they hate each other so much, because I can't honestly think why these rich kids would hate the cops. The cops will bend over backwards to do something for a rich kid. But I guess they see what they hate in themselves, and they don't like it, and so they attack it in somebody else.
Well, it's just, they're working out their daddy or mommy issues out in the street. But it's so weird. There's not a single sign that says stop the masks, or maybe you've seen them. I don't see them, or restore sanity.
No way. Yeah, no way. We don't do sanity here.
There's nothing here either in the countryside. I mean, there's Trump signs. I mean, but that's it. I mean, there's one farmer that has a truck, and he's put something on his truck about vaccinations, which is great. But that's it. And so it's almost like part of the function of Black Lives Matter is to make sure that everybody's focused on something completely not related to what's actually going on right now.
This idea of redefining characteristics like objectivity and hardworking and stuff like that as white supremacy, which is actually what they're putting in workbooks that they're giving to school children right now.
Really?
Yeah. This is.
I mean, that's so. I mean, it's so disrespectful to. I mean, how do they think that the black people who have thrived, and there are many, how did you think they survived and thrived through incredible discipline and diligence and hard work, and that's not being respected?
Yeah, that's the thing is that this is the most racist thing that you can imagine. I mean, not only is it insulting to white people, but it's extremely insulting to black people. They don't have objectivity. They don't have perfectionism is not a trait found in black people. I'm sorry, that's bogus. So like, I mean, it's really absurd, but this is what they are getting away with teaching children, and at least in Virginia, this part of Virginia, which interestingly enough, there was a group of parents that were successful in suing because AIPAC, America Israel Political Action Committee, had gotten something into the textbooks there, basically saying Palestine never existed, and this has always been Israel, and blah blah blah. They got that out, but I don't know if they're working on this one too. It just makes me wonder, okay, are these the same people, pushing these things? It just seems kind of like that might be the case because it certainly doesn't benefit white or black people. So I don't know.
Yeah, so it's a multi-armed beast. They got a program on the news, they got a program in the schools, they've got signs on everybody's lawn. It's amazing. Well, Helen, we could talk all day and all night and probably
I gotta go.
late into next week. Thank you for your time again, and I'm going to put all the links that we referred to, everybody. So if you'd like this, you can go even deeper into it. Helen and I are right, and we know we're right. I don't mean right wing.
Yeah, I wish everybody else knew we were right. That would be nice. I'm really sad what I see in New York City, man. It makes me very sad.
But the comment I get the most from people is, thank God you're keeping me sane. Because people are isolated and they feel like they're the only ones seeing this. And you're not, folks, you're not the only one seeing it. Others of us are seeing it. There's plenty of evidence, which is why Helen works so hard to stack it up and I work so hard to stack it up. We're not just making assertions. We're also organizing the data so that, you can really see it, and those who want to see it can see it. This is madness. This is lunacy. This is destructive, and it's based on fraud. And we don't need to work out the last 10 decimal points of the projection of the whatever. I mean, that's good. It should be done. But what we just need to do is call this dog what it is. It's a fraud. It's a calculated fraud with the intention of causing injury to people. And so far, they're getting away with it. Well, Helen, thanks so much. Great to see you. And
thanks for having me.
Keep doing what you're doing, and I'll catch you next time.